and welcome. It's another fantastic selection here of terrible tales. It's another Radio 2 Confessions podcast. Thank you for downloading us. Here we go with an extraneous exam excitement, teenage teetering terror, potty-mouthed punk poetry, PG certificate, and a frightfully fresh, fishy faux pas. Here it all comes. So here's tonight's tale, and this is, and if you've got a lot of exam stress, then here's the thing to listen to. Just for a few minutes, you can go back to the biology notes in a moment. Just hang on. This comes from Dr. Rainer Forrest. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Dear Father Simon and the merciful members of the Heavenly Collective, at this time of year, as university students prepare to sit their exams, I must seek forgiveness for a dreadful deed that has troubled my soul for over 20 years. Back in the early 90s, I was a PhD student at a university somewhere in London. As I do not want to tarnish the name of this august institution, I shall, following in the footsteps of the young ones, refer to it as Scumbag College. I shared an office with various PhD students, two of whom I shall refer to as Sandy and Pedro. The three of us were under the supervision of an eminent and distinguished scholar, who, to spare his blushes, shall be known here as Professor Sandal, as this was his preferred choice of footwear, usually the open-toed variety, which he wore with green socks. Classic. Fashion tips. The three of us worked as exam invigilators. Hello to all exam invigilators. This involved lording it over the undergraduate students, handing out extra writing paper and trying to catch students cheating from crib notes. He actually added quite a lot about cheating at this point, which I've taken out. It was a rule of Scumbag College that for any exam there always had to be two or more invigilators in the room at any one time. No invigilator could ever be left alone for any reason. We decided, as we liked a prank every now and again, that we would invent a fake exam for Sandy to invigilate with a room full of misbehaving students, such an endeavour would not be planned just by ourselves, of course. We needed the support of the senior exams officer. Fortunately, we were friends with him. Let's call him Smokey, as he did a lot of that. Smokey immediately agreed to help us with planning our caper, and he booked a room for our dastardly deed. Pedro and I faked an entire exam paper. Wow. We invented a paper called Business Ethics. Needless to say, there's no such course. Full of ludicrous questions. Smokey arranged for the exam paper to be formatted in the Scumbag College style and prepared a seating plan and student signature sheet on the designated stationery, all in a bona fide exams office envelope. We recruited another invigilator who didn't normally partake in our juvenile nonsense, but who on this occasion agreed to take part. We're going to call him Manuel. We then roped in various undergraduate students to sit this exam, tempting them with the offer of free beer. Most of them would have sold their grandmother for a pint. Pedro and I met them in a refectory on the morning of the exam. One was given a cream bun, while another was given a ballpoint pen holder and some milk powder. All were given detailed instructions on what to do, how to do it, and when to do it. That afternoon, Pedro and I kept well away from the room where the exam was being held, for if Sandy had seen us, she would certainly have smelt a rat. All the students and Manuel turned up on time, and the fake exam got underway on time as planned, with Sandy and Miguel invigilating. Shortly after the exam had started, Smokey opened the door of the room and said, "Hey, Manuel, can I have a quick word with you outside?" Got a little bit London towards the end, unnecessarily. "Oi, Manuel, I need a word. Outside now." Outside. Immediately, Sandy's antennae were alerted. "You can't go outside. There needs to be two of us at all times," she said, unnecessarily Jane Austenly. She protested this rather lamely as Manuel left the room, closing the door behind him. And this was the cue for the students to start misbehaving. In perfectly choreographed role play, one knelt by his chair and started praying for success in the exam. Another took his shirt off, announcing that it was too hot and asking for the windows to be opened. The guy with the milk powder? Well, you can guess. The guy with the cream bun made a complete mess, eating it, smearing it all over his face and that of his neighbour, and loudly demanding tissues. Sandy was faced with the exam invigilator's nightmare. She was alone with a room full of unruly and disrespectful students. She was in charge of the exam from hell. Sandy barked orders like a regimental sergeant major. "You put your shirt on. No, you can't see the academic registrar. You stop that with the powder. You stop praying and get back to your seat, all of you." It was chaos, Father Simon. Eventually, after a couple of minutes, Sandy realised it was a wind-up. When she left the room, she was confronted by the sight of Pedro, Manuel, Smokey and I in the corridor, doubled up laughing, tearfully with uncontrolled mirth. It was the first and last exam on business ethics held at Scumbag College. A couple of years later, we somehow all got our PhDs. Today, Sandy is a senior manager at a university somewhere in the UK. Pedro and I have managed to hold down university jobs for the last 20 years. We've all written books. We even get invited to speak at the odd conference. We meet occasionally and reminisce about the old days. We don't need forgiveness from Sandy. She saw the funny side straight away, and we had a few laughs about it down the pub later in the evening. Nor do I seek forgiveness from the undergrads who were shamelessly corralled into our wizard wheeze. They were just a bunch of muppets who had nothing better to do. Loving the students. But I must seek forgiveness from our supervisor, Professor Sandel, who had no idea that his 3 most trusted and prized PhD students were totally out of control, causing havoc around Scumbag College. Finally, I need forgiveness from the university itself. It was and still is a fine seat of learning that did not deserve the risk of having its fine reputation besmirched by students to whom it had given the opportunity of studying for a higher degree. I throw myself on your mercy and await your judgment with trembling trepidation. Yours, Dr. Rayner Forrest. Brackets, pseudonym, in case we had worked that one out. Well, I took quite a lot of that out, by the way.
Yeah, I'll bet.
This was... what's interesting about this is that because it's a made-up exam, you can kind of get away with pretty much anything because it's all completely bogus unless you're the person left invigilating in the first place, Sister Bobby.
Yeah, it's about one person. It's about Sandy, isn't it, really?
Yes.
It's a big setup. It sounds like a bit of immersive theatre, to be honest, where one person's the audience. That's what it sounds like.
Immersive theatre.
It sounded great. I have to say, look, even if it was a very, very, very reputable university, I'm sure they'd appreciate, look, what gets you through life, sense of humour, really. And I loved it. I absolutely loved
it.
It
was like a flash mob, really.
It was absolutely brilliant. I love the one with the cream bun. So absolutely, I don't think you need forgiveness, because I'm actually so impressed by this. I'm just going to think of things that I can do to you two now. So, yeah, absolutely forgiven. You've just given me...
That didn't work well, did it?
Oh, dear.
Brother Matthew, what are you saying?
An awful lot of work involved in this, wasn't there?
An awful lot of work, yes.
It felt a bit like Game for a Laugh. There's a reference for the teenagers there, asking mum and dad.
It definitely needed to be filmed.
Yeah, and who is this student who's taken his shirt off? But he couldn't wait to get his shirt off. Put your shirt back on, Brian. No one's impressed. So I am not going to forgive, because I think it ruined the spontaneity of the occasion. And
what did?
Your man taking his shirt off. What's that about?
It was just one of the ways of misbehaving.
Yeah.
There were other ways.
Other ways, clearly.
Milk powder and praying.
Yes, no, I got that one. So, no, I am not going to forgive. And what? Yeah. Right, okay. Yes.
Okay, so you're not forgiving.
That's right.
As I mentioned to Matt, we've edited this so it's now suitable for general listening purposes.
Yeah.
But there's hints in there.
Is it a PG?
It's a PG.
Okay.
Yeah. It comes from Sandra. If you miss any confession, by the way, the podcast is available at the end of the week, and you can listen again. And you can send yours to confessions@bbc.co.uk. It has its own email address. Simon in the Collective, says Sandra, as I now approach a significant birthday, I've had chance to reflect on my younger years, and throughout all of this, one incident sticks out as particularly needing of forgiveness. I would say I am firmly middle class, and from an early age, my parents instilled in me the need to be sensible. I have sensible friends who also attended a private all-girls school with me, not quite as sensible as me, but friends any sensible middle-class parents would approve of. This needs to promote being sensible and duly considerate to others. This need to promote being sensible and considerate to others ultimately led to the situation which I would now like to confess about. Myself and 3 close girlfriends embarked on the traditional post-A-level holiday. We decided to travel to Crete. I would say we were all fairly sensible and fairly naive about life in general. Not unexpected for 18-year-olds, but we were fairly inexperienced when dealing with the opposite sex, especially in large numbers. We were the group of partygoers who, on our first night out, went far too early to find the bars and clubs practically empty and left before midnight when probably, I wouldn't know, the real party started. We didn't actually go out again. But it's not on our night out that the incident happened. In fact, in preparation for our collective dinner date. If you will, picture the scene. We had embarked on a hard day's sunbathing. Not too hard, we drank lots of water, put on at least factor 50, and only spent 20 minutes at a time in the sun. Sensible, you see,
Correct.
in
Well
all
done.
things. That's what you
Yes.
have to do. We had been outside most of the day, which had been nice and quiet as it transpired, because most of the other hotel guests were in the group that only left for the clubs at midnight, and as such got up significantly later than us. My slightly less sensible than me friends had left the sunbeds early to get ready to go out. Having decided it was fine. How long does it take to go out? It doesn't take that long.
Well, if you've got 2 hours, it can take 2 hours.
It
If you've got 10, it can.
2 hours.
There's a lot
That
to
is
prep.
insane.
That's because you two've got short hair.
Is that it?
Yeah,
Right.
it's definitely it.
Anyway, having decided it was finally time to go, I looked around to see my travelling companions had left a whole range of items on their sunbeds. Thinking this was pretty inconsiderate given the increasingly busy pool, I took it upon myself to collect their belongings along with mine. It transpired they had left quite a lot. I'm not sure if you've ever tried to carry 4 towels, 4 bags containing phones, cameras and so on, as well as some suncream. It's not very easy. I could have left some back, but no, I was going to take it all at the same time because I am very sensible. I was taking this all back at once. I decided the quickest route, avoiding potential clattering of partygoers, was to walk around the edge of the pool where possible. For the majority of the journey, this was a sensible choice, and in fact, I was internally congratulating myself on my balance and poise when I reached the far corner of the pool. It was then I felt my foot slip on the corner of one of those damp ridged tiles which gives you the unmistakable sign your foot is approaching the pool. Quickly calculating that the phones, cameras and so on in the bags would not agree with falling in the pool, I did what any sensible, self-respecting individual would do, and I launched myself full force forward. The towels were jettisoned from my hands, leaving them free to grab a stabilising shape that I could see before me. Despite this whole incident lasting moments, I saw it unfolding before me in painstaking slow motion. My free hands grabbed onto that stabilising shape to slow my fall to my knees, with towels flung everywhere. Unfortunately for me, and for him, the stabilising shape was in fact a young gentleman from the all-male party who appeared to be standing up, beer in hand, captivating his fellows with some story or joke or other. Even more unfortunately for both of us, my hands had grabbed onto his swimming trunks. And as the force of gravity propelled me downwards, the trunks came too. The male in question made a grab for the trunks, but the aforementioned beer made any realistic attempt at saving the situation untenable. So there I was, no friends for support, in front of an unknown boy, fully naked from the waist down. This is where my private all-girls school education failed me. I would like to think if this had happened now, I would make a witty joke and apologise to the boy and his now seemingly massive group of laughing male friends. What really happened is I took one look straight ahead, made a noise between a laugh and a scream, wondered what matron would say, and as one does, and frantically gathered up the belongings and ran to my room, which I now wish was very far from the pool, as every single sunbather knew what room I lived in. Father Simon, I don't want to apologise to my friends for having their belongings spread across the floor, but to the unidentified male, who I put in an extremely compromising position, and forcing him to suffer the indignity of having an 18-year-old girl basically laughing at him in front of his friends. That's the way it went. Anyway, if you send me a brown paper envelope, I'll send you the original. Anyway, Sandra needs some forgiveness. I think that is very, very clear. She was trying to do the right thing, Sister Bobby. That's what she was trying to do.
She was, yes. And I really feels for that young man because obviously
Really?
he had no control of the situation.
No, not his fault.
And there he is with round his ankles, by the sounds of it.
I think
and
that's
of no fault of his own. That is terrible. And all his mates laughing at him. I think for the mistake of doing it, I understand how it happened. Well, I'm kind of actually a little bit confused how it really happened. How you managed to pull a man's
Trunks?
yes to his ankles. With the object of saving yourself. You could have grabbed his shoulder or his arm or anything. But what I'm really disappointed in is you didn't just kind of, I don't know, throw a towel around him or something. Did you have to run off?
She was slightly... her education had not prepared her for a moment like that.
Surely a sensible girl can grab a sensible thing and cover the boy up.
Oh,
I
my.
think she's not forgiven.
All right, okay.
Okay. Yes.
Brother Matthew.
Obviously, I mean, no education, private or otherwise, would prepare one for knowing what to grab in this situation, or what to do or say in such a predicament. So,
and he ended up with a massive group of laughing friends.
he did, didn't he?
Which is not a nice place to be.
No, it's not. What's he doing holding a beer so close to the pool? That's what I want to know. That, in fact, probably brought it upon himself by holding the beer.
Drawing attention to himself.
Drawing attention to himself, holding a beer near a pool. So I am going to forgive, because, frankly, he had it coming.
Confessions up and running, and this comes from Bob the Poet. Thank you, Bob the Poet. Father Simon, now I should say probably PG. Are we PGing on this? It's been tidied up, shall we say? I've worked very hard tidying this up, and it's all very obvious where, right? So, Father Simon, holy and beautiful collective, I'm writing to you to apologise for a small faux pas that occurred this last bank holiday weekend. Normally during the day, I'm a meek and mild member of an office team whose main ambition is to get through the day without falling asleep or getting their tie stuck in the photocopier. But during the evening, my alter ego is as a punk poet. I'm basically a failed musician, and so moved into poetry a few years ago, as I found that nothing beats the buzz of a live audience. I love to perform poetry whenever I can. There are 3 separate audiences that I generally perform in front of. Small children at birthday parties, local beard-stroking, roll-neck, jumper-wearing, daisy-chain-making hippie poetry societies, and my favourite gig of all, supporting punk bands. A punk audience, always good fun. It gives me an opportunity to belt out some good sweary rants and to forget about the miseries of the working day. Obviously, the content of my poems varies greatly depending on the audience, but basically it's the same poem, plus or minus a few Fs and Jeffs. By the way, in case you're worried, there are no Fs and Jeffs in this email, obviously, because that's the way it goes. The other day I had an email from somebody who had seen me on stage, and they asked me to perform a short set in the evening at a charity concert in a charming little village on the outskirts of Leamington. Come the day, I set off to Lemo, as we used to call it, but because one of our buses didn't turn up, I arrived later than expected and was hurried through to the back of a marquee by an overly eager, elderly Margaret Rutherford lookalike, dressed in tweed, twin set, and clipped a wireless microphone to my T-shirt and said, "You're on in 5 minutes. You're on in 5 minutes, dear." I thought I'd better ask the old lady what the audience was like so I could pick some suitable poems. And she said, "Oh, you'll like them, dear. They're all over 18. Great, I thought. My kind of audience. I went through my book and I chose my favourite rant poem that I used to open a lot of gigs. It's called "Bother This Rain, I'm Off to Bloomin' Spain." It's a poem that gives a long list of things that I hate about Britain, but then, halfway through, takes an abrupt volte-face and lists all the things I love about Britain and living in this country, and the conclusion of the ode is that I love where I live and I'm never going to leave, as it's the best place on earth. It does, in the true tradition of a rant poem, include quite a bit of swearing. There is at least one very rude word on every line throughout the whole poem, but it's a favourite of mine because it's a great icebreaker and it always goes down well. So I thought this is a perfect opportunity. I've got an adult audience. I'm going to go for it. I've never used a wireless microphone before, so thinking on my feet, I thought that it'd be a funny thing to start off the poem behind the curtain. Oh, no. And then... You ahead of me? Then burst onto the stage after I've read out the first few lines when the audience start laughing, as they always do, Father Simon, he says modestly. I could hear the announcement being made. Nervously backstage, I passed Wynne silently. What? Wireless microphone. I'm not falling for that. It's wireless microphone. And now it's time for poetry, says the person. Here's Bob the Poet. I waited for the ripple of applause to die down, and then I ripped into my first poem. Right, ready? Oh, flippin' bother, this is a flippin' pain. No flippin' bus and no flippin' train. And on my trousers a flippin' stain. Flippin' British weather and it's at it again. It's pouring down and I'm going insane. Bother this rain, I'm off to flippin' Spain.
Well done.
That kind of thing.
Yes.
Yeah? It's probably worth mentioning at this point, says Bob the Poet, that after years and years of performing in noisy venues, I've developed tinnitus. So I don't always pick up on what people are saying. So when the old lady told me that the audience was over 18, what apparently she was actually saying is that the audience there was over 80. 80 in total. Yes, over 80 5-year-olds, not 85-year-olds. I could have got away with that. But 85-year-old children and their open-mouthed mothers holding hands over their tiny children's ears. Well, really. I was in as much shock as the audience, so needless to say, at this point, I segued into a milder poem called The Ballad of Professor Sidney Sockface, his monkeys and the incredible mountain of poo. And here's the first verse, which I haven't had to change.
Brilliant.
1,000 miles away, and maybe 2, over the hills from Timbuktu, lies a professor and his monkey crew, downwind of the incredible mountain of poo. Well, the mere mountain of toilet function seemed to calm down the youngsters, and I gamely carried on with a kid's version of my normal act under the watchful eyes of worried, well-to-do parents ready to storm the stage should another sweary word be spoken from my mouth. I finished my set, and fortunately my foul-mouthed rant at the start was all but forgotten, and the little boys and girls applauded me as I left the stage, or probably because I left the stage. Father Simon, I would like to apologise to all those little children who have now learnt a few phrases of Anglo-Saxon from the disgusting tirade of abusive language I uttered, and I also like to apologise to their parents, who were probably still in shock after hearing all that, when they were expecting to leave their children in the capable hands of a poet while they nipped off to the Prosecco stand. Your kind regards, Bob the Poet. You've got to look at the audience. That's the thing. Never, ever. If you're going to have the radio mic, just have a peep through. Make sure that it's the right audience. Anyway, so some work went into that, both from Bob and from the production side. What do you think of that, Sister Bobby?
Oh, Bob the Punk Poet. Thing is, it is such a lovely, funny story. And I imagine there were some adults in there that quickly dashed out of the back and were falling about laughing outside, actually. I think it would have been highly entertaining if you're an adult. Of course, the thing is, the real risk is what the children brought home. And I think, given the fact that you're the professional, and given the fact that you should just put your head round the back and not relied on the advice of the lady who said they're all over 18. I don't know, I'm caught. I'm kind of stuck in the middle. But the thing is I know you didn't mean to, but in the end, there were lots of small children with a lot more words than they ever needed to know. So I think I'm going to say is, look, really, you should have looked. You're the professional. You should have just checked. Like this case, although hilarious, and if it was personally just me, but generally you're not forgiven.
I quite like the sound of the ballad of Professor Sidney Sockface.
Yes.
That could be a whole series. What do you think there?
Well, it's got echoes of John Cooper Clarke, this, hasn't it? I think if you were the parent in that situation, you would know straight away, oh, this is obviously a mistake. He's obviously there's no way that a poet is coming on and using that kind of language in front of kids.
Or flip and bother, it's a flipping pain,
yes,
no flipping bus, no flipping train.
Absolutely. So obviously you would think this has been a mistake. And you know, we can all sit here and say, oh, he should have looked through the curtain. Well, the fact is he's a punk poet and he doesn't play by the rules. So if you're a punk poet, then you don't play by the rules, you don't look through the curtain. And
well, you don't get employed again.
Well, exactly, but that's those are the breaks of being a punk poet. So I am going to say forgiven.
It's time for another drive time confession. Nigel has joined us. So we now have 2 Liverpool supporters in the room, and exactly, that's the kind of thing. But pack her up then, Nigel.
It's going so well. Anyway, never mind.
Anyway, Bobby's thinking, I've got no idea what's going on.
No, I understand.
Do you?
Yeah, it's not golf.
No, it's not.
golf.
We could talk about that again. Anyway, maybe we shouldn't. So tonight's confession comes from David. David, thank you very much indeed for sending this in via the email confessions@bbc.co.uk. Dear Father Simon and the ever-forgiving collective, mine is a sad story. Is the heinous wrongdoing which I shall relate was originally meant to be a good turn, but, as you will see, it was a good turn to one of the 2 parties involved, but it turned rather bad. This tragic tale happens in the 1970s when I, a city boy born and bred, was on a beautiful holiday in the country, in the beautiful Wye Valley on the Welsh borders. Now, the country is nice, Father Simon, but you rarely find a choice of salads, and you usually only get one dressing. You never get 3G, and you can never find 70% cocoa dark chocolate, which is just one of the things. That's
Maybe that's a bit harsh. 'Cause some years ago, of course, I'm presuming this all is.
Yeah.
The Wye Valley's changed
to
dramatically.
be honest, to be honest, in the 1970s, nowhere had 3G at
I was
all.
going to say, yeah, let's struggle to find it then.
Yeah. And I think you had salad cream then, and you enjoyed it, as indeed many of us still do. My wife and I were walking along the course of the River Wye in early spring. I cannot describe just how perfect the setting was. Well, have a go, David. Oh, okay. It was a clear, dry and warm morning. Spring blossom was everywhere. The river sparkled in the sunlight. Those of you who've been fortunate enough to visit this part of the world will know that the River Wye is both very wide but also extremely shallow in most places, which means that hikers can walk along the actual bed of the river close to the running water but with dry feet. So in this earthly paradise, we walked along together hand in hand. The only sounds that we could hear were the rippling of the river, the song of the birds, and a muted metallic sound which we heard occasionally but we couldn't quite place. Anyway, on we walked, lost in the peace and tranquility of the scene, when I noticed, on a dry part of the riverbed, something rainbow-coloured glistening in the sunlight. We walked over to it and were amazed to find that it was a really, really large fish, a salmon, lying on the pebbles many yards from the nearest water. We gazed sadly at the beached fish, wondering just how it got stranded. Nothing made sense. It could not possibly have leapt that far from the mainstream, so how had it ended up where it was? Suddenly, the fish, a huge, fabulous salmon, Father Simon, which we both presumed to be dead, opened its mouth and did a fishy gasp. I have to tell you, it was alive, and it looked as though it was mouthing to me, "Save me! Save me!"
But for what?
Instantly, I sprang into action. Gathering up the fish as gently as I could, I rushed over to the pebbles, to the nearest part of the main river, and I lowered it into the water. In no time at all, it flicked its tail as if to say, "Thanks," and was gone, back to the safety of the river. I had done a good thing. I had saved one of God's creatures. All was good. I genuinely felt elated. I'd saved this beautiful creature which somehow had become stranded and would surely have died had I not done what I did. Well, on we walked, and very shortly the river took a sharp left-hand bend, and as we walked round we heard that metallic noise again, now quite loud, and we saw the cause of it. Standing in midstream, a salmon angler. The metallic noise was, of course, as any country boy could have told me, the sound of his reel being played out, and our eyes met. "Any luck?" I asked weakly. "Any luck?" I asked weakly. With the air of quiet fulfilment, he told us that it had been a good morning. In fact, not just a good morning, but maybe the most wonderful morning he could ever remember, and certainly the biggest fish of his angling career. Somehow I managed not to say, "That's what you think, mate," and I bid him farewell. Well, thank heaven, another bend in the river quickly obscured us from view, and we legged it as fast as our thin, pale city legs would carry us. Father Simon, as you can see, my intentions were the best, and if we could ask the fish, I'm sure it would have no issue with my conduct. It would say, "Thanks." But I really do feel for that angler who had the bad luck to run into a well-meaning but dumb city boy. And the dumb city boy is called David. Well, you know, you just need to make sure there's a variety of dressings, and then you're fine for anywhere you want to go for a walk. But anyway, you can see what he was after, Bobby, and he did a good thing by the fish, because the fish lived to be caught again another day. What do you think?
Oh, he certainly did, and I'm not without bias here, being a vegetarian. Of course, it is the right thing to do in that situation. The thing is, he had no idea that there was someone, an angler.
Not an angler.
There was a fisherman
Parked
around the corner.
in the river.
Anyway, and the other thing is, of course, if it's just the fishing he's after, it wasn't necessarily for his tea, or was it? I said he wasn't going to throw it back in the river. And
Well, it doesn't
most
look as though he was going to
fishermen-
throw it back in the river, because he'd put it on the
most fishermen
rock.
throw it back, so that was for his tea. So he can do something else for his tea. There's always cheese on toast. I think, given the circumstances, and you didn't know, it's absolutely fine and you're forgiven.
What do you think, Nigel?
Well, my emotions are running all over the place with this one, because
Oh,
initially I
dear.
thought he was going to take it and then eat it and take it away and think, that's for me. But he didn't. He put it back. That was amazing. But what plonker abandons a prize-winning fish on
Good
the
point.
on the riverbank? You should keep it. If you're going to keep it alive, you keep it in a keep net. That's why it's kept there. Or you have a thing which is called a priest. I don't know why it's called a priest, but it's a heavyweight, normally metal. It's a small cudgel, and you hit it on the back of the head and you put it out of its misery, because you can't leave a thing just to gas to death through asphyxiation. Or asphyxiation even. It was about angler. If it was really his fish and he abandoned it and went round the corner to carry on, he's a lunatic. So absolutely forgiven, David.
There you
Without
go. You
doubt.
see, there's a man who knows his fish.
Yes.
So that's actually a very good
And we
point.
will hear, with no doubt, why a priest is called a priest.
Do you think?
Yeah, I guarantee it.
All right, Matthew, why is a priest called a priest?
Yes,
You're a Catholic
I'm
lad.
pretty sure. I'm pretty sure the rules of the riverbank apply here. Which, if they existed, I don't think they do. But if they did, it would be if you catch something, make sure you've put it as Knight says, you put it somewhere where it's kept, and therefore you don't, because it looked like he'd abandoned it. It was just left there, and it was out of his sight. So I am going to forgive. It's absolutely the angler's fault. Shouldn't have left your fish where you couldn't keep an eye on it. Why didn't you put it where he was? Didn't make any sense. Your own fault, mate.
They were this week's confessions. If you forgave anybody, I'd like to know, plus your own shadowy secret, please. confessions@bbc.co.uk. More in a week, and don't forget you can listen to everything from the last 30 days on the iPlayer. Monday, Susan Calman in was talk about her book, Cheer Up, Love. We had a very fine Tuesday on Tuesday. Relive it all. On Wednesday, ABC's Martin Fry popped in to talk about the new album, The Lexicon of Love 2. And Thursday, Nigel, during National Vegetarian Week, gave us espresso rubbed tomahawk steak. Thank you very much indeed for listening. All the details on the Radio 2 website. And if you get this far, just tweet me tomahawk steak. Thank you.